In this video, I'm going to break down a case where an Ohio dad was found to have acted in self-defense when he shot his daughter's ex-boyfriend who was attempting to break into their home. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you believe in your right to self-defense, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Arms Directory. Arms Directory is the place to go for Second Amendment protected social network in a marketplace that's actually pro Second Amendment. Feel free to post your favorite gun pictures, talk prices, and find local events all in one location, again, that is Second Amendment friendly. So if you're interested in that type of social network, I will leave a link to Arms Directory down below, and thank you again to Arms Directory for sponsoring this video. How's it going, everyone? My name is Anthony Miranda. I am a licensed and practicing attorney in the state of California with an emphasis on Second Amendment rights. I've been part of Second Amendment litigation both at a state level and a national level while serving as a staff attorney with the Firearms Policy Coalition legal team. My goal with these videos is not to provide you any legal advice, but instead to give you greater insight into the world of the Second Amendment. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video we'll be discussing a popular case that's been going around in the internet. This case involves a father in Ohio who unfortunately had to shoot his daughter's ex-boyfriend because that individual was trying to break into their home. Now, at the outset of this video, I want to preface this by saying that in no way am I a self-defense expert, but I think looking at these types of cases and incidents will really help give you a better insight into what the Second Amendment is really all about, and also help you understand some legal concepts in regards to self-defense and also help you understand some of the legal processes. Because again, one of the core aspects of the Second Amendment is your right to self-defense, along with other things like your right to defend yourself against tyrannical governments, both foreign and domestic. So first, let me set the framework of what happened in this situation. On July 31st, a 22-year-old man named James Rowell, ex-boyfriend of Allison Duckrow, was seen on a doorbell footage coming to the home of Allison's parents. Just minutes before he is actually seen on that doorbell footage, Allison and her mother are also seen coming home from getting breakfast. The facts indicate that the boyfriend had been following the mother and daughter, and when they arrived at the home, this ex-boyfriend attempted to make contact with Allison. At the time, Allison's father, Mitchell Duckrow, had already been at the home and he was just kind of waiting there for the mother and daughter to get home. In a 9-minute long video, you can see the ex-boyfriend ringing the doorbell several times. He then becomes agitated and attempts to get into the home. In the video, you can hear Allison and her parents telling him multiple times to go away and that Allison doesn't want to talk to him. At the same time, the mother is also on the phone with 911. The ex-boyfriend then starts slamming himself into the front door in an attempt to break the door down and to get into the house. On the video, you can also hear Allison's father clearly state that he has a firearm and that he will shoot the ex-boyfriend if he tries to come into the home. However, that did not stop the ex-boyfriend, and unfortunately, the ex-boyfriend then did break down the door and started to make entry into the home. In response, Allison's father then fires at the ex-boyfriend and the ex-boyfriend is shot 3 times. In the footage, you can then see the ex-boyfriend stumble down the pathway and ultimately he passes away in the driveway. While all this is happening, Allison's mother was on the phone with 911, and later in the footage, you can see neighbors respond to hearing the gunshots. Allison previously had dated Mr. Rowell, but they had ended their relationship more than 18 months prior. The day before the incident, he called Allison and left her a voicemail, but Allison did not respond and had no contact with him after those 18 months. There is some other footage as well with the family speaking to the police officers when they responded to the call. And also you can see some footage of the family also speaking with police officers in interrogation rooms after the whole incident. After the incident, the Shelby County prosecutors in Ohio charged the father in the shooting of the ex-boyfriend. However, fortunately for the father, a grand jury did reject those charges. In explaining the decision of the grand jury was cited to state that the stand your ground laws that allow homeowners to use lethal force when they feel threatened was their justification for not indicting the father. This scenario is really interesting, and I wanted to use this real-world example to kind of talk about multiple facets and aspects of self-defense. So first, let's start with the whole self-defense generally as a legal term. Each state has their own specific laws, but generally a person is considered to have acted in self-defense and therefore will not be guilty of a violent crime if they can prove kind of 3 of the following elements. First, that they reasonably believed that they or someone else was in imminent danger of being harmed. Second, they reasonably believed that the imminent use of force was necessary to defend against that danger. And 3, they only used the amount of force that was reasonably necessary to defend against the danger. So generally, when looking at a self-defense situation, you look at those three concepts. You look at imminence, reasonable belief, and proportionality. Those three help to set the framework on whether or not you acted in self-defense. However, in this case, there was also the added wrinkle that this happened in the state of Ohio, and Ohio has a burden of proof that is different from most states. Ohio does not use the standard of a beyond a reasonable doubt, which most states actually use. Instead, Ohio deploys the lower bar of by a preponderance of the evidence. Preponderance of the evidence means that it's more likely than not that a certain fact is true. Often this is explained as anything slightly above 50% of a probability. This standard is often used in civil cases and leads to whichever side has the slightest majority of evidence in their favor, ultimately winning a case. This standard is also important when it comes to Ohio self-defense cases. In Ohio, preponderance of the evidence is the required proof for guilty verdicts. In Ohio, if the majority of the evidence supports a claim of self-defense, then the jury is instructed to acquit the case. If the majority of evidence in contrary points against self-defense, then the jury is instructed to convict the person of those charges. The standard is in contrast to the beyond a reasonable doubt standard that most other states use. Beyond a reasonable doubt is one of those standards that's not fully defined, but essentially it means something close to 100% certainty, maybe even 98 or 99% certainty. So one of the first lessons that you can kind of gather from this case in this real world scenario of this father is that you need to understand the specific laws of your state because they could be very different from the laws of other states. And because of those distinctions and changes in laws from state to state, it really could play a critical role on whether or not a jury believed what you did was justified or if you were not. Another aspect of this case that is a good teaching point is the unfortunate realities of this whole legal system. You may look at the situation and think that the father was completely justified in what he did. However, the fact remains that he still faced a grand jury and a grand jury indictment. The prosecutor in this case still went after the father and he faced potential imprisonment. And it's also important that you understand the various aspects of a case, the various processes. And also just here, I'm going to talk about the indictment in general. At this stage of a case, only the prosecutor is allowed to introduce evidence. Your defense counsel may question that evidence, but they are not able at this point to present their own evidence. This step is essentially testing the prosecutor's entire case. If the prosecutor cannot actually get the grand jury to rule in their favor, even with no opposition from your defense counsel, then the likelihood essentially is that they don't have a legitimate case. Often this process goes in the favor of the prosecutor, and one of the common phrases that you hear pop up in regards to this whole process is that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. So oftentimes it does go in the favor of the prosecutor. However, in this specific case, Mr. Duckrow, the father, was not indicted, and the case against him was ultimately dropped because the grand jury believed that he acted in self-defense under Ohio's stand your ground laws. This leads me into the next critical point of this video that I want to point you to, which is that you need to understand your state's own self-defense laws and the various offshoots of those laws. Most states have some combination of various subcategories like a duty to retreat, castle doctrine laws, and then also stand your ground laws. 16 states have a duty to retreat law where you must retreat if possible rather than to use lethal force. So depending on what state you live in, you need to actually know what laws are in place and if you have a duty to retreat or not. Then you need to look at other things like the castle doctrine because that can dictate things based on specifically where it happens. The castle doctrine establishes that you don't have to retreat when you're in your own home. This means that even though you could escape your own home, maybe leave your home, maybe go to a different area in your home, you're not legally obligated to under the castle doctrine. And then also you need to understand various aspects of the castle doctrine, which again, these are kind of multi-leveled. You need to also understand what is the curtilage of your own home and how your own state law actually uses the curtilage of your home concepts. In most states, the curtilage of your home is considered to be part of your castle. Typically, this includes your front porch, your garage, and maybe even your front yard. But every state is different, so you need to understand where your own specific state draws those lines. For example, the state of Massachusetts is one of the strictest states, and they only include the four walls of your home as your castle. Therefore, any area outside of your front door, if you take just one step, that is not considered part of your castle, it's not part of your curtilage of your home, and therefore is not protected. In this case, the ex-boyfriend was at the front door, and ultimately he broke the front door down and was starting to enter the home. Therefore, Ohio's castle doctrine laws would kick in, And the father here would not be required to try to flee his home or flee into a different area of his home. The castle doctrine would protect his actions. However, there is also the concept of stand your ground, which you heard the grand jury mention was one of the justifications for why they did not indict the father. 37 states do not require a person to retreat, even if it's safe to do so. And this applies beyond just your home. Instead, the laws allow you to defend yourself where exactly you are. Now, with all of these concepts, the duty to retreat, the castle doctrine, the stand your ground law, you are still alleging self-defense. Those are simply subcategories to determine if you were required to avoid the situation, to flee, or if you were not. Under self-defense, you will still have to demonstrate that there was imminence, proportionality, and reasonableness, which I mentioned at the outset. Those are the main factors of self-defense. These other concepts, stand your ground, castle doctrine, duty to retreat, are mainly focused towards whether or not you were required to avoid the situation or not. But ultimately in this case, the grand jury did not indict the father because likely he had an imminent fear of great bodily injury or death to himself or a family member, and that the threat was imminent and that he was justified in using the proportional deadly force to meet that threat. Also, he was not required to avoid the situation since the ex-boyfriend was a threat, he was entering the home, and the father had the right to stand his ground. And therefore he was not indicted and the charges were ultimately dropped. But one of the main things I want you to take away from this video is that you need to look at your own state's specific laws and understand what your laws define as self-defense and some of these other nuances in regards to self-defense, because that really could mean the difference between you being free, you acting in self-defense, or you finding yourself in prison for the rest of your life. So if you guys like this type of video, let me know down in the comment section. Also, if you like this video and like support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm or fuel Algorit's rhythm. It adds fuel to his jet and signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. Again, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys directly impact these videos, impact this channel, and help me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation is built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.